In this video of Historical Context with a Historian, we'll be talking about dudes and dude ranches. Throughout the book, you'll hear the term dude occasionally being used, and if you listen to the book, it's pretty obvious that people don't mean exactly the same thing by it that people tend to mean today. When people say dude, often it means like bro, as with, just a person. It can also be an exclamation, dude. Clearly it's different. What was going on in the book was clearly a different usage. And it is a usage we don't really see today. The word has pretty much completely changed its meaning. So, what is actually meant in the book by dude or dude ranch? Well, there's a lot that goes into this, really. At its most basic, a dude ranch is basically the same thing what we today would probably call a guest ranch, is a more common term today. A sort of ranch, but not really a functioning ranch. Today especially, they're pretty much never functioning ranches that actually raise cattle, raise sheep, or whatever. They're places where people go on vacation. They're more like resorts, but where you do sort of outdoorsy Western things like riding horseback and fishing and hiking and things like that. So what we would think of as a guest ranch is what is meant by a dude ranch. Now, originally, these would have been functioning ranches, and certainly we see that is the case in the book with Bishop's Dude Ranch, the place where the Moores went to stay, Jack and Helen Moore and their parents. It is clearly a functioning ranch because they also were having trouble with rustlers, with people stealing their sheep. And so clearly it was a functioning ranch, and originally they were. But this is something that sort of gradually phased out. Instead of using tourism to sort of supplement their income, they became sort of all about tourism. And this was something that took a long time. So that's what is meant by a dude ranch. But clearly there are implications going on too. For example, we hear in the book people say things like, well, I'm not as much of a dude as you think. Or Ricky, who says that if he were to move to the West, he wouldn't want to be a dude, he would want to be a real cowboy, a real shepherd. So clearly there's something going on there. And the term dude, certainly in the late 1800s, early 1900s, as far as into the 50s was really kind of the tail end of it, referred to a person who was basically a tourist of the West. A person who went to a ranch, usually a dude ranch, but as if going to a resort. These are people who are not tough, who are not actually working the range, who are not actually fit for frontier life. They're city slickers, they're tenderfeet, are some other slang terms for this kind of person. Dude is another one. It's a person who likes to sort of pretend they're a cowboy without actually being in any kind of danger, without actually having to deal with any of the difficulty of it. And so that was sort of the implication of the word dude. And that word actually came first. The term dude ranch came from the idea that those are the sort of people who mainly go to them. So that's sort of what is meant by the term dude when you encounter it in the book. But there's more to that than just the term dude. So where did this whole idea of having a ranch as a vacation destination, where did that even come from? Well, it came from a lot of different places. Back when the very first, arguably the first establishment that you could call a dude ranch or a guest ranch, started in the 1880s. Started up by a group of brothers whose last name was Eaton, the Eaton brothers. And Their ranch was called the Custer Trail Ranch. They started in the 1880s. And this was a time when the frontier was closing. There wasn't a lot more frontier left. Americans were starting to hit the Pacific Ocean. And so this idea of being able to go west, go to unsettled territory, was ending. And people were beginning to think about it in a very nostalgic way as kind of the good old days. Oh, it's so sad that that's ending. And so there was a lot of pop culture, really, in the late 1800s into the 1900s that celebrated this idea of the Wild West, of the frontier that was ending. And this could take the form of the very first rodeos. This could take the form of novels, Western novels. This could take the form of plays. It also took the form of something called a Wild West show. The most famous of these, probably the gold standard of them, was called Buffalo Bill's Wild West. And Buffalo Bill, his real name was Bill Cody. He was a spectacular publicist. He was a spectacular showman. He was amazing at getting people to be interested in what he was doing. He was amazing at that. He was amazing at setting up shows that would be fascinating for people. And he started a group called Buffalo Bill's Wild West. He specifically didn't call it a Wild West show because he didn't want it to be a show. He wanted it to be like experiencing the actual West. And so it was just called Buffalo Bill's Wild West. And they had sharpshooters. Probably the most famous of them was a woman named Annie Oakley. There were cowboys. He made a point to actually hire real cowboys, not actors, doing rope tricks, doing trick riding, things like that. He had actual Native Americans. He didn't hire actors. He hired actual people to, do reenactments of Sioux villages and things like that. He had reenactments of battles on the plains and all of this kind of stuff. Wildly popular. People loved it. In fact, he took his Wild West show to Europe, where it was also wildly popular. Queen Victoria in England was a huge fan. And so this is a time when people are fascinated with the West now that it's ending. So late 1800s into the early 1900s, the frontier is closing or closed. This period of American history is ending, and so people are fascinated with it now that it's almost gone. And so dude ranches, or the first dude ranches, the first guest ranches, were a part of that too. This desire to experience the West. Now that it's gone, what was it like? It's part of the same impulse. Additionally, Teddy Roosevelt, one of America's more iconic presidents, loved the outdoors. He was highly educated. He had actually been kind of a sickly kid, and so he had studied zoology and all this kind of stuff. But as an adult, he was a famous outdoorsman. He set up a lot of national parks. He loved the outdoors. He loved the wild areas of North America. And he also loved the Wild West. Now, he was not a frontiersman. Buffalo Bill was. He had actually been on the frontier. Teddy Roosevelt wasn't. He just liked it. And so when he heard about the Custer Trails Ranch, he thought that was a spectacular idea. And so he actually ended up having his own kind of hobby or for fun ranch that he set up. And he loved it. He had a great time with the hunting and the riding and the fishing, and it was awesome. He wrote about how awesome it was. And so, because he's Teddy Roosevelt, he was a celebrity even before he was a president. And so he brought a lot of attention to this idea of the West as a vacation. And it became incredibly popular. Early 20th century, this was a massively popular way to go on vacation, to go to these dude ranches or guest ranches. And initially, they actually were functioning ranches that just took guests. But as time went on, it started to shift. They began to focus more specifically on the guests and not really on running a ranch. The actual ranch part of the business became kind of an afterthought. Instead, the emphasis was on fun activities like dancing and parties and having people go riding and campfires and fishing and all of that kind of thing for the guests. And this was the time when the term dude was applied to these people from back east, often wealthy. They wanted to be pampered when they were there. They wanted it to be like an all-inclusive resort kind of experience. And people who had actually dealt with the hardship, because being a cowboy, being an actual cowboy, was really hard work and it was dangerous. You had to deal with risks of floods and tornadoes and lightning strikes and grass fires and stampedes and cattle being stolen from you and all kinds of stuff. It was not an easy sort of luxurious life by any means. And so a lot of the people who had really experienced that kind of hardship were really annoyed with the people from back east who wanted to use it as, you know, as a resort, who wanted to experience the West, but experience it in a really luxurious way. This is where the term dude came from, as kind of an insulting term. It doesn't really have that meaning so much anymore, probably because the people who actually did experience the hardships of being a cowboy on the frontier, that's no longer within living memory. So there are no longer people around to be annoyed by that in the same way. Dude ranches or guest ranches are still around, for sure. It is not as popular as it was in the early 20th century, but it is definitely something that exists. I myself have been to Deer Valley Ranch in Colorado a couple of times actually, and it's a lot of fun. They have hay rides and campfires and square dancing and lots of riding and it's good fun. Fishing and all kinds of stuff. It's good fun. It's not really terribly resembling the actual reality of life in a frontier ranch. It's for fun. People go on vacation there. And so that's sort of where dude ranches or guest ranches came from. That's kind of why the term dude had a feeling of kind of an insult, that dudes were kind of obnoxious. That's where some of that came from. And a lot of it still continues today. Now, for example, in the book, we discovered that Bishop's Dude Ranch is one that actually is still a functioning ranch. But it's pretty clear that the Moors go there basically on vacation. And so we have sort of this transition going on to where it's a functional ranch, but it's also a dude ranch. It's actually called that. So it's sort of a transition. Your average guest ranch today is not probably going to be much of a functioning ranch. It's pretty much going to be more like a resort. But that's kind of where that idea came from. And a lot of it is from nostalgia for the Old West, for the frontier that closed. And much of that is still around today.